All right. We're 2 minutes after. What do you say we get started?
Good.
I'll look at the admissions as people come in.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to our September edition of Jobs to Be Done Untangled. We're really excited. We have a special guest this month, so we're mixing it up a little bit. And I've got Jim here with me as well. So welcome. If this is your first time, or there are a lot of repeat folks on the line. So some of you know how this will unfold, and some of you it's totally new, and we hope you enjoy it. I'm going to go through a couple of updates to the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit. That's the site that Jim and I run. Most of you are probably familiar with it if you are here. We have a series of different products. We have our online essentials course. It's 4 hours of video training, templates, all kinds of resources that we've packaged in there so that you can have a really great overview of jobs to be done. It's really geared towards learning how to facilitate jobs to be done inside of your organization. So if you're running an initiative and you are kind of trying to figure things out, figure out how to get people on board, this is a great resource for you. And then we have our special guest, Brian Ray. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Thanks for joining.
At the end.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure.
And then at the end, we'll roll into the Q&A where you can ask both Jim and Brian questions about your most challenging jobs to be done concerns.
Great.
So I mentioned the online course. We also, or the online training. We also have this course that we launched a couple of months ago, and it has really been going very, very well. This is Job Maps from Beginning to End. It's a week-long course. It's 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. By popular demand, we've actually extended the length of it. So we're now running it for 2 hours. It's really hands-on activities. We provide you with a ton of resources up front so you can familiarize yourself with all of the jobs to be done basics. And then Jim will work with you. We have some examples that we use to build a job map, to understand how to derive opportunities from your job map, understand what to do with the research that you gather and how to get that research. And then, you can ask us all kinds of questions. It's really conversational. It's really interactive. It's not a ton of lecture. And it's been super popular. So keep an eye out for more announcements about that. We've been sharing some testimonials from people who have taken it in the past. And let me know if you have any questions. And then lastly, we've been working on this ebook. I know we laugh. It's really almost done. We're in the final stage of copywriting and adjusting all of the spacing. We also have our existing ebook, A Brief Guide to Interviewing, and the Jobs to Be Done Canvas, which the instructions for the Jobs to Be Done Canvas are a really great resource as well. Jim put a lot of time into researching and writing about how to use it in your organization. So there's some great tips in there as well in the instruction booklet. I think that's all for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thanks for that. Again, don't forget to ask your questions in Zoom. I'm going to ask Brian a couple questions here. We're going to have a little interview, but then we want to spend most of the time listening to your questions and have a conversation here. We are doing this as a Zoom meeting. So if you turn your webcams on, and then when it's time to speak, we can have a dialogue here. But you can put your questions in Zoom. Elaine's going to gather all of those, so then we'll have the questions that we can go over. So think of your questions either based on what we're talking about here, what Brian and I are going to talk about, or just in general, your questions in general about jobs to be done. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest, Brian Ray. Now, Brian, you've been involved in jobs to be done for a while, and I came across your name while I was writing my book. And you were very helpful in some of the feedback that you gave. And I even used it was your version of the 4 forces, that diagram. I think I credit you down at the bottom that you were gracious enough to let me do that. I think the graphic department recreated it or whatever, but it's essentially yours. And I just wanted to give you credit again. I give you credit in the book. So that, thanks for helping out with the book project. That was really helpful. But
well, no, actually, let me jump in and say thank you, because my kids think I'm super famous because
you can open the page and say, look, Daddy's in the book. Yeah.
Yes, my name is in this printed piece of material. It must be a big deal. Yeah.
No, I was really thankful for all the input that I got from all kinds of folks around the world, Wolfram and other folks to the book. Because writing a book is not a solitary thing. You don't do it by yourself. Like the responsibility falls on you, but there are dozens of people that are involved, like the connection that you and I made. So thanks for being here. Why don't you tell folks just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So right now I'm an independent product consultant, and I do jobs to be done research for startups. And so, that usually looks like a seed stage or a Series A, team who's kind of starting to find some traction, but and maybe they've got a little bit of funding, or if they're bootstrapped, they're starting to get some revenue. But oh goodness, of all these things that we could build, what should we build?
Mm-hmm.
Or I work with a couple of innovation teams within very large organizations, functioning like a startup. And so that's the work that I help them to do, is to understand, who is our customer, what is the job that they are trying to get done, what are they hiring us for, is that aligned with what we think that they're hiring us for? And that leads to doing customer interviews, and following up with surveys to get a larger sample size to validate that, and then sitting down and doing the work to say, okay, this is all the anecdotal feedback we got.
Right.
This is what the data seems to be telling us. Let's put on our designer hats here and see how this translates to the roadmap.
That's great. And we're going to get into that in a little more detail when we show folks your app. Brian has created an app. And I just threw up the URL. Is that the best place for folks to find out more about you? It's brianray.com, right?
It is.
There you go. So if you want to learn more about Brian there. But I wanted to ask, before we get into the app, I wanted to ask how you got into jobs to be done. What was your gateway point?
So I was head of product at an early stage startup. We were a Series A team, 25 people. And so, we were definitely in that, gosh, I hate to say it, but really just like hair on fire mode, so many different potential places we could go, seeing some traction, in different areas of the product, and trying to figure out how do we leverage our strengths against our position in the marketplace, et cetera. And then I heard Des Trainer at Intercom talk about, mention this thing, jobs to be done. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I started to dig into it there, read Clayton Christensen's work, heard some, Jason Fried, some of the stuff that he was talking about at the time. And of course, Bob Mesta and Chris Speck. I watched their talk at Business of Software, where they did a live, interview, a live switch interview. But there was something about that just completely clicked on. The idea that your market is not defined by the demographics, characteristics of people, but it's the idea of what are the things that they are looking to get done. They don't care about our thing, and they don't think so much about what kind of person they are. They just want to make progress so that they can get onto these other things. And let's identify that, draw a border around those things, around those needs, and those desires. That's our market. That was really fascinating to me. And so that was my intro into jobs to be done. Began to practice it at that startup as head of product, and since just continue to dig in.
Great. And I do want to show the app, but how long have you been on your own, not as a head of product? You have your own consultancy. How long?
Yeah. So goodness, it's been a while now. It's been about 4 years.
Okay.
It's been a while. And so we're getting ready, I guess, to transition into the app, and why I thought that would be something that the market could use. It's that, and I'm sure people on this call have experienced this, is that in trying to implement jobs to be done, it can be confusing, and can feel overwhelming. Never mind just trying to get your arms around the different flavors, different takes, etc. But fine, once you decide which one works for you, in a given stage of any given project, it's still difficult to run a structured interview, to make sense of your notes after the interview, to be sure that you've got consistency across multiple interviews within a given project.
Right.
Those are the questions that I, get most often from teams when I begin to engage with them is, oh my gosh, Brian, like you made that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, just saying like, the feedback they say is you made that look so easy. Like,
Right.
how do we, fill in the blank? And the inconvenient answer is, well, I've done it like 100 something times. But what I hear you saying is that, can you give me some sort of structure
Right.
around, we know that we need to interview our customers. We understand that these are the types of questions that we ought to be asking, but can you kind of put some training wheels on or something
Right.
like that? There's your book is amazing, and the courses that you and Elaine are putting out, I think, are fantastic on the education side of things. And so what I'm exploring and trying to introduce is, okay, in addition to that good information, in addition to that education, could there be a very opinionated tool around conducting the project itself?
Let's take a look at that opinionated tool. I love that phrase, opinionated tool. It's just ones and
Yeah,
zeros. How can ones and zeros have an opinion? But here we are at the Jobs to Be Done app, and the URL is jtbd.app. If you go there, you'll get like a sign up page, right? There's not much, and it's not quite launched. We just want to warn folks, right? It's kind of alpha-ish or beta-ish somewhere in there. Is that right?
I would say late late alpha. If anybody goes there, you will see, hey, sign up for early access. If you just respond to the form email that you get and say, hey, Brian, saw you on JTBD Untangled, then I'll invite you in for sure. Late alpha, because it's certainly buggy. You'll need to be a patient person, but there are some paying customers who are using it to execute projects at the moment. So
tell us a little bit how it's set up, because I think a lot of what you were just talking about, the things for me that Jobs to Be Done really helps teams with, at least I've found, is a focus, right? You have to focus your innovation efforts, but also that consistency as well too, and translating what you hear into this new language. And I think this app does a really good job at doing that.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. So I mentioned it. I'll say where I started from. The first thing in it I built was trying to answer that, address that concern, that pain of it's hard to take structured notes, or it's hard to make sense of my notes after the fact. Don't do that. Go into it with a template in mind. And so that's what the interview guide that the app currently presents, walks the interviewer, through, very quickly collecting those desired outcomes, showing which outcomes have we collected from previous interviews. Does this interviewee validate or confirm or disaffirm?
You're doing all that kind of on the fly. You're doing that while you're doing your research up front.
On the so now when I do interviews for my clients, gone are the days of a Google Doc or something. I use the tool.
You're going right in here. And
go right in there. And
I've seen some other tools that are out there, and I think this is unique that you have this spot up here for the data capture. Actually, most of the other tools assume that you're doing this in spreadsheets and recordings and Google Docs and things like that, but you've actually baked it in here. So this is correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of a hypothetical situation where you're looking at producing a podcast, and then you went out and talked to Ted, Keeley, and Bex about producing a podcast. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
If I click on Ted, what do I get in here then?
So this is us seeing the interview after the fact, but basically what you're highlighting here is something else that I hear from folks is, gosh, how do I start an interview?
How do you even get into the conversation?
How do you even get into it? And so it's as simple as just starting through those, checking them off as you do them. And you'll see like there's a little hint there, a little tip.
I see you can actually check those off. Sorry, I just got rid of that. I hope it didn't.
Yeah. So you check those off as you're
Literally check them
going.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, and just walks you through.
Right.
And so what we're seeing here is, these are outcomes that have come from previous interviews, either with Keely or Bex.
I got
And
you.
so we can, we can say, hey, Ted, something we've heard is
Gotcha.
from other people trying to, produce
Right.
a podcast, is that they're trying to minimize the cost of hosting multiple shows. That resonate
Right.
with you? Yes or no? And that's just going to, when the project is over with and we're trying to,
Right.
see where do we feel some energy, there's at least some data points.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you'll notice, I think
can take notes here.
you can take notes, free form as you go.
Yeah.
You can very quickly, capture those outcomes. And so the structure of this particular guide, obviously is modeled after some of the ideas that Tony Ulwick shares in What Customers Want.
Right.
Amazing book. If there's anybody on this call that hasn't read it, you want to go out and check it out right now. But this approach, this particular interview, is helpful for a particular type of project. And again, I'll give credit to you and your book. Your book does an amazing job of showing this is when this is applicable, this is when it's not. And the next things on my roadmap are to provide a similarly useful, I hope, interview guide for a switch interview or a usability interview and so on. Yeah.
Cool. So you do the interviews, and I love the fact that you can be validating across those interviews as you're going.
Yeah.
I have a little case study in the book, by the way, where we actually did that in a completely separate step. So we did interviews to extract job steps and outcome statements, and then we massaged those and balanced them out so they were well formulated. We actually did another set of interviews to validate those in a completely separate step. But you're really taking the fast path here. You're really kind of short circuiting a lot of steps.
Yeah, I want to. And the stage that the app is at, and my personal experience and the audience that I'm working with and trying to speak to right now is definitely what I would call lean jobs to be done.
Right,
in
a week, jobs to be done in a week. Yeah, that things like that.
Yeah.
Right?
And when you are in that type of cadence, it is much more efficient to try to quickly validate as you go.
Yeah.
So
and then so then I have I have my interviews, and then I have all of the outcome statements here, and then I can. How do I get to the prioritization grid? I want to show folks the prioritization.
So go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom there.
It is at the bottom.
And surveys, click on produce a podcast.
Okay, there you go. Right.
Yeah,
so
we should.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. So the step in between those interviews and this data is then taking all of those different outcomes and presenting it to a large number of people.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
So you can do a quantitative sample on that too. You can do hundreds of people and then quantify
exactly.
it here. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so again, something that I working towards and have in development at the moment is just making it as simple as clicking on 4 outcomes and spitting it out to a mailing list, or even including it as a snippet somewhere in your application.
Interesting. Right, to do that in a lean way too. Yeah. Nice.
Yes. So
that's great.
And so that this is the meat of where the tool currently stands.
Right.
And I'm talking to my customers obviously right now about okay, what would a lean product strategy, product management feature inside of this look like to make it easy to then hand off to your full-blown product management tool that your team is using. So that we can, so that we can bridge that gap. The design, I think the design design principle that I am trying to apply to every bit of this is what I would imagine a lot of practitioners on the call often struggle with is bridging those gaps. We know that we need to be talking to people. What's the best way we can structure that? Right. Okay, cool. Jobs to be done is helpful. All right, we've done this research. Now, how do we bridge the gap into the roadmap, or pitching it to executives? And so those are the things that I'm really trying.
I love the fact that I love the fact that that's your mindset, and that the app mirrors that, those real pains that you felt out there, and you're really trying to fill in that gap through this structured software. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's
Yeah,
for sure the vision. Anybody
Yeah.
who's interested, please, pop over to jtbd.app,
Yeah,
fill out that form.
Super
respond.
Easy URL. I love that you got
Yeah.
that URL.
Wait,
what's the URL of the Jobs to Be Done app? It's the
Yeah.
Jobs to Be Done app. There you go. You can't forget that one.
Definitely.
You can see how quickly I typed it because I remember it there.
Yeah.
So tell you what, instead of me asking the next question, Elaine, I think there were some questions from Brian that we got, right? Maybe
Yeah, I just
we can take one of those.
I just pulled Trevor's question out since it doesn't look like you or Josh came
Okay.
today. So why don't we start with Wolfram Head
I'll just
2.
go right here with Wolfram.
Yeah, and then
You
I
want to ask
lined
your
up.
question of Wolfram, Brian?
Yeah, I can just read it again. So
Yeah.
my questions would be, because I have the same challenges every time. So how do you kick off these projects? How do you explain the value? How do you sell it so that you can, I mean, you want to apply it, it makes sense. Do you just do it, or how do you get enough time? You mentioned jobs to be done in 1 week. So how pragmatic and lean can you be to start? You understand what I mean? So explain what you are doing and convince them that what you are doing makes sense. That's
so can I clarify from a consultant's? Are you asking this from a consultant's context? How do I convince my client of the
Sure.
lens? Well, I mean, I'll say I've got a little bit of a cheat in that all of my clients are inbound leads from articles that I've written, and so I've effectively, convinced them through the article, and so
okay, that's unfair.
Yeah,
because
they're already pre-interested in Jobs to Be Done, Wolfram. That's why they go to Brian, right?
So they are pre-interested. I think that the the advice that I would give them then to you is to have a few of those, like, really meaty, like, anchor types of stories. So don't pitch it too much on data and stuff like that. That's good for support, but people like to be convinced by stories. And so Mesta and Spec, the great one is about what are you having for dinner tonight? And so, talk to that client and say, yeah, you need to talk to people. This is why I believe that this lens is extremely important, is because if you're currently defining your market by age, gender, income, etc. Well, let me ask you this. There's a 40-year-old woman, and she drives a BMW. What's she having for pizza tonight? Or sorry, what's she having for dinner tonight? I blew the punchline. And the answer is you don't know. And then say, okay, well, let me put it to you this way. There's a person who's running around like crazy. They've got to go first to drop off, the dry cleaning. Then they got to go pick up a kid from soccer, and then they need to go, run somewhere else to get the oil changed. Are they going to have lobster or pizza for dinner tonight? And obviously it's pizza or something adjacent. That is what Jobs to Be Done says. That is the sort of lens that we need to look through. Is what sort of progress are people trying to make in the context that they're in? I can help you with that.
Right. I need to connect you with Wolfram, Brian, because he's also got some software that's pretty impressive that I think actually you could learn from. So we like to connect people here in our Jobs to Be Done community on Jobs to Be Done Untangled, and it's pretty impressive what Wolfram has done.
Great.
Internally.
Yeah, make the intro, Wolfram. I look forward to chatting with you.
There you go. All right.
Jim, the next set of questions I lined up all together because they're all about interviewing. So Kathy, Wolfram, and Miguel.
Okay. And maybe I'll jump in here, but we'll let Brian take
please.
a whack at it. There you go, Kathy. Hey, Kathy, you wanna come on and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So we're just getting started. I'm not a consultant. I am a competence center within a very large corporation. And I'm a UX practitioner as well, or CX UX practitioner. And I'm really interested in Jobs to Be Done because we have a new product that we're putting out in the market. And we are, let's say, trying to transform, I'll throw in a buzzword, digitize, digitization with our customers. And I want to really boil down to what where to focus, because it's just massive. It's huge. We have many markets and it's just too much. And I'm just curious, as someone who values quantitative data, I'm just curious, like how many interviews are we talking about to really get to what you would call a valid job map, or something you would feel comfortable or confident to show to others?
I got a thought on that, Brian, but I'd love to hear what you have to say first.
Oh, I mean, I was going to say that the number that I always start off with in my head is 8 to 12. You would be surprised, even with a very complex issue, how quickly you will start to see the same patterns emerge. Right. And so tons and tons and tons of new information, you know, on interviews 0 through 6, some validation and patterns emerging, and, you know, 6, 7, and 8, and then, you know, drilling down and validating or invalidating, you know, 8 to a dozen. Follow that up with some quantitative research, rinse and repeat. Right.
So yeah, jobs to be done does begin with qualitative research, right? And I think that's the big question here, is how many people do you need? And then this, you know, this can be in the hundreds, you know, this could be up to 1,000 or more quantitatively, right? After you derive the things that you want to quantify, which are usually outcome statements or need statements. Could also be job steps and some other things there too. I'd agree with that. I think I mentioned that in my book as well too. 6 to 12 or something like that is a good sweet spot. I think you also got to remember with qualitative research that your data is text, what people say. And if you talk to somebody for a half an hour, that's 30 pages of transcribed text. There's a lot of data there. It's not numbers data, but there's a lot of data there. Even though it's only 8 people, you have a lot of data points. And I try to make that point when I'm talking to stakeholders, that no, I collected 300 pages of data that I'm analyzing for this. Now, I know you don't necessarily do that, Brian, because you got your app now where you can actually kind of do the analysis as you're taking notes. So you're not doing the interview, transcribe, data analysis, but there's still a lot of data that you come across with 8 to 12 people. Yes. It's a lot of data, actually.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I will say, I think an important part, you know, of the first step is identifying and defining and getting some agreement on what level of granularity are we trying to get out of this project, because you cannot get, you know, the full spectrum, you know, in 2 weeks of interviews and a couple of some follow-up surveys. It just can't be done. So you know, being sure that there's an understanding of, we're going to start off, you know, very aspirational up here, and then we'll dig in, and, you know, so on.
That's actually kind of the question that I was hearing, Kathy, behind your question, was when, you know, and I love the fact, Brian, that you consult like startups, because with startups, there's already a focus because the team is interested in space, you know, X in front of them, and they don't have a dozen legacy products. They haven't grown by acquisition and have all of these interests and domains that collide. But if you're working in a large organization, I think one of the first things you have to do is to sort out what I call your jobs to be done landscape. Who are the job performers, which jobs? And you really need to kind of put that into a sifter and kind of sort it all out and say, we have these 10 job performers and they each have 3 jobs. There's like 30 jobs that are relevant to our business from the jobs to be done perspective. You really got to sort that out first. And then you do the 8 to 12 interviews for once you've kind of not segmenting, because it's not segmenting, it's sorting things out and defining your jobs to be done landscape. So you got to do that first up here. And I love the way you say it, level of granularity.
Yep. It's well said.
Does that help, Kathy?
Yeah, it does a lot, actually. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, step by step. Thanks.
Yeah, right. Well, and the other thing too about sorting out your jobs to be done landscape, you're not saying we don't care about that job performer or those jobs. You're just saying we're going to start here, and you can always then you have a research plan to kind of fill that in, right? So you got to just start somewhere. All right. Is this the next logical one, Elaine, then? You think Denise?
No, take a quick look at Wolfram and Miguel's questions.
Okay, I'll go over to Miguel just to get another voice in there. Hey, Miguel, nice to see you.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you, Jim, and Brian. Well,
all right, you want to ask your
it's
question?
just, this is very simple. what kind of rituals are you following in preparing your interviews? Do you have a very basic 3-4 steps? Of course, it will depend of your client, but do you have your very basic steps in preparing your interviews? You know what I mean? Are you looking for a special source of information of that client? Do you have any upfront interview before entering, digging more deeply? I wonder if you have.
Typically just at least a handful of screener questions can be helpful if, like Jim has said, you've kind of identified that you've got this whole job landscape. Do we have alignment on which one we're focusing on? And how are we going to ensure that the folks that we're inviting into these interviews, are going to be giving us, good information in that sense.
And are you disclosing a little bit your value proposition, maybe in that small screener or these very initial steps?
No, no. I mean, Jim, you may have opinions on this as well, but that's something that you want to hold back. As much as you can is, the idea of regardless of how far in the process you are, is to actually say something like, we're in the very early stages of research here. There's no wrong answer that you can give to us. We aren't invested in the outcome here. We are truly just trying to understand, at a high level, and what you're trying to get done. So
agree. And as soon as you represent, I found this, as soon as you represent a product, company, or brand of any kind, and you approach somebody, there's an implicit assumption from their side that that's what you want to talk about. So if I go, hey, I'm from Mural and I want to talk about your job to be done, the first thing they're going to say is, I had problems logging in last week. Can you help me with the login? And no. I don't care about Mural. And they're like, wait, you don't care about Mural? Why are you talking to me? Is I want to know about your job to be done. And I actually find it hard at first to get away from that. So I would do as little as possible, Miguel, in screener or any contact with the customer to telegraph anything about your product or your brand or your service, because you're going to have to fight against that. As soon as you sit down in front of them, you might as well have, your company name tattooed across your forehead. What I find though is about 5 or 10 minutes into, people like talking about themselves as well too. So as soon as you start, no, talk about your job, then they get into it. Right. But there is this inertia in terms of it's already moving, that they assume that you want to talk about your product or service, that you have to overcome that inertia. So as little friction as possible to overcome that inertia, I find helps, particularly if you're thinking of Kathy's situation, right? Kathy, you're going to go in those interviews with a ton of baggage that you need to overcome, and you don't want to add to that baggage. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, completely agree about staying away from that as much as possible. And so as a practical example, if the screener questions that I would be asking, if we're thinking about that example of, the job to be done is to produce a podcast, and we're looking for folks who produce a podcast, the screener questions would be, when was the last time you published a new episode? When was the last time you launched a new show? How frequently do you launch an episode or a new show?
Right.
That's what.
And that's it. That it's like 3 questions, right, Brian?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Very good. I appreciate it, Brian. Thank you.
Cool. So I'll scooch back over to Wolfram's question. I think, Elaine, that was the next one, right, for Brian?
If we want to do another interview question, or we can start moving on to some.
Okay, let's just do this one. I think I said jobs to be done in a week. I think that was my thing. So I don't know, Brian, if you want to. I was kind of being exaggerated based on what
I'll let you register that domain name. It's yours.
jobstobedoneinaweek.com. There you go. Yeah. But I do think, Brian, that sometimes people think, oh crap, we got to do qualitative research and quantitative research. This is going to take 2 months. I'm a startup. You know what I can do in 2 months as a startup, right? Do you get that? You get that attitude. So how do you deal with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, by laying out very clearly, here's what we're going to be able to get done in 3 weeks. Now, interviewee attendance aside, we can't control for that. But we can knock out 3 interviews per day as soon as we can start to get those scheduled.
Right.
We're going to have a couple of working sessions, between us to go through everything that we learned, everything that we heard, and then measure that against your domain expertise, your appetite, what you know about the history of the market, etc. And then we're going to very quickly bundle that together into a survey, and you are going to start having actionable data as soon, once those things start coming back. There's no need to overcomplicate how quickly some research will help you start to make decisions versus none whatsoever.
Versus none.
And you do not have to wait for perfect information. And so, I always couple this with as well, from the very beginning, nothing that these interviews or this survey is going to tell us is permanent and infallible gospel. This is another data point, for this team to be able to bring, context, expertise, position, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's how we've got to, go about looking at this. We can get a lot done in a short amount of time, and it's going to be extremely directional and very helpful.
Hey, Brian, do you, because you have the app now, do you start exposing data as you're doing your research, like the outcome statements as you do it, or even the survey as you do it?
The outcome statements more likely, but for sure the survey, no, I don't.
You want to wait until you have it.
Wait until it's all in.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. But the outcome statements, I mean, that's very helpful to go ahead and start discussing.
Because I think, Wolfram, to put the question back on you, correct me if I'm wrong, but the tool that you built, you actually have a rolling survey data that's going. So you're seeing like live responses to your survey in your prioritization chart. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. So we can start right away, and the more answers we get, the job, so the map starts to change depending on the participants and so on. Yeah.
So it's like a live survey. Have you ever heard of that before, Brian?
No, I mean, that's
me neither.
That's really fascinating. And I would say that I'd be hesitant to expose that to the client until there's like some, minimum number of responses, but that'd be fascinating to watch.
I think Wolfram is his own client though, more or less, right? That you're the main consumer of that information, right? Yeah, right.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Let's jump down and take a couple more questions since we've got about 5 minutes left or so.
Where should we go?
So I think, is Denise still on the line? I think she had to jump for a meeting.
Oh, she was here so early too. Oh, that's too bad.
She and Emily had kind of corresponding questions. And then Kathy gets into the sort of the B2B context that we hear.
So should we go over to Kathy then? If it was a similar theme to Denise's?
Yeah, let's do Emily really quickly. And then
Emily.
Kathy.
Hey, Emily, are you here? Do you want to read your question?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Yeah. So after doing the jobs to be done, brainstorm map before we even got to the qualitative research, and we kind of presented some of this data to our internal stakeholders, but there's been more of a push to focus on the existing product pain points because we know that there's a lot of things that are wrong with the current product. So I was wondering, how do you make that connection and what's the best way to go about it?
I just want to clarify before we get in, Emily, is this what you did? So you sat down and you create what I call an assumption job map based on your own knowledge. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah. We're still we're in the stage of recruiting to validate that right now.
And then you want to recruit. And so you want to do the research in the next step. And then typically what I would do is then find your opportunities from that, which you can do with just the job map, various ways to do that. Okay. So you're still right about here though. You've just created that and you haven't done the research. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, we have past workflow interviews, but nothing to validate the actual assumption.
Gotcha. Okay. That's great. And then already your stakeholders are like, yeah, but what are the pain points people have with our current products? They're already there's a little bit of Wolfram's question there too, I think, and to some degree, even Kathy's question. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Brian? You got the solution already in mind. Why don't we just compare it to this thing?
No, my first follow-up question, just to be sure that I even go in the right direction, is how do you know? You said we know that there's the product isn't quite right.
Right.
How do you know that? Because of
Yeah, there's been like, we look at escalations from customers, and we also did an internal experience review on the product and received low ratings.
All right.
Okay. So then if I were, I mean, having that bit of information, I think the thing that I would do is there some, can we tag or categorize all of that negative feedback around a specific feature or around a specific product in the product line? And then do some sort of assessment of, okay, is this something that we are interested in fixing? Or is this, have we appealed to a particular part of the market that we never should have to begin with? If the answer is this is our market, they're just not happy with this, cool. Then, you know, focus there, dig in on that and see if there's a particular product in your line or feature within your product.
Right.
And, you know, with some assumptions like Jim is talking about, but then kick off your initiative around the idea that we're going to do some research to see if we can solve this job a bit better.
And sometimes I find when you talk about pain points and existing evidence around problems in an existing solution, you might not need to do jobs to be done. You might not even need to do research to then fix those things, because if you're having a party and your doorknob or your front door is broken and the first person tells you the doorknob is broken, you don't wait for a quantitative sample before you fix the doorknob. You just look at it and you say, my doorknob's broken. I don't need to go validate that my doorknob is broken. I can see it's broken. Do we need to fix that? I mean, if you have a lot of these things, you might need help prioritizing them. I guess my point is there are things that you're going to do in your organization, even in your product organization, usability testing, fixing bugs. Just keep doing that stuff. Just keep fixing that stuff. Now, to Brian's point, though, I think what you can do is use a little bit of logic that jobs to be done prioritization gives you to tell you which ones are more important to fix. Should we even fix these? Or do we even care about those versus some other ones? So it feels to me a little bit here, Emily, like you want to kind of go up and say, what's the job to be done? What's that job map? And people are going down to very tactical things. And I think you need to kind of bridge that gap. I think your suggestion is absolutely right, Brian. Like, how do these map to features? What are the clusters of pain that people are feeling? How does that map to a job? Right. Yeah. Right.
Well, and you touched on it, but, you know, identifying, are there pains here because of bugs, or are there pains here because there's not product market fit? And is it because we're in the wrong market, or is it because our product is not there yet? And you know, if that's the answer, then jobs to be done.
Well, one of the plays that I have in my book, I got from Alan Clement around onboarding. And he said, you know, sometimes the onboarding problem is a lack of knowledge of your solution, but sometimes it's a lack of knowing what the job is to be done, right? So if you're talking to, I don't know, if you make a solution that helps marketers do marketing, and there's a lot of pain there, maybe it's because they need to be enabled in understanding how not just to use your tool, but to do that thing better, right? And that's where customer success and enablement come in, right? So you could use jobs to be done. Check out that play in the playbook around onboarding, because I think you can use that logic. Is the pain with my product, or is it the fact that they need to know how to do that step in their job better as well too? And you can fix the product all you want. There's still going to be a novice at that step, right? Yeah,
that's a good point.
But that's where I think that's where jobs to be done comes in. It's orthogonal, or it kind of crosses these other concerns of bugs and fixes to the product, and allows you to shift the conversation and have a higher level conversation and move things in a different direction. That's what it feels like you need to do a little bit here, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. And I see we're at time, Elaine. Do you think we can get another question in if folks want to stick around? Are you good to stick around, Brian, for another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good for another few minutes.
Yeah, you can take Kathy's question. And then Steve was also asking if the app includes help with job mapping.
Not yet, but that is definitely on a development branch. Yeah.
You got to get the team. You got to get the team working on that.
I know. Yeah.
The development team. You got a big design and development team working with you, don't you?
That it is me. It is another.
There you go. Right.
Yeah, part of my brain and calendar. Yeah.
Is this the question here from Kathy? All right. Hey, Kathy, you want to jump back on?
Yeah. Hi, it's me again. Thanks. So I'm in the B2B context, and some of our markets are really complicated with many stakeholders and layers in between us, let's say, and we'll call them the end customer. So I just didn't know if you guys might have any tips or recommendations on how to take a machete to the complexity somehow, because it's a little overwhelming, and I'm feeling, where should we start?
Yeah, Jim, I'm going to let you take that one because this gets to be really difficult.
I think it is sorting out your jobs to be done landscape. And then the question is, where do you start, right? Okay, great. We identified all these job performers in my value network, and I identified all these jobs. Where do you start? I think there are kind of two answers to that question. The one is, what are you about? Like, what is you know, as an organization, you have a view on the world that you believe that your solution will help people do something. And there's an aboutness of your organization. Like, what are you about? Right? Like here at Miro, we're a collaboration solution. So we're about collaboration. So when I look at all possible jobs that our job performers who are of interest to us do, helping them collaborate is kind of what we're about. And we want to understand getting that job done. So that's one starting point, is like, what matches your aboutness as an organization. I think the other one, though, is where do you have the biggest gaps as well, too? Or where's a strategic gap? Like, we want to move from, you know, professional construction people to home renovators. But we don't know a lot about home renovators, right? Oh, okay. Well, that you know, that might be another clue, is that you have a strategic gap in knowledge. Well, let's start with that job, right? Could you look at professional construction, you know, jobs to be done? It's like, yeah, but strategically we have a gap. So you need to sort things out and then ask yourself, what are you about? And then where are your gaps in knowledge? That's often a clue to where you should start.
I think what can also be really complicated, or what I've seen is really complicated in these situations, is, you know, the what's the job to be done of your buyer, Kathy. And, you know, too often, correct me if I'm wrong here, but, you know, price becomes just such a huge factor in there, regardless of how, you know, well or poorly, you know, a given product is addressing the entire job to be done. But I mean, I think, you know, recommendations for the B2B context would be to say, to recognize, do we have a buyer? Do we have a gatekeeper? Do we have an executor, job performer? And you know, setting aside, you know, understanding that those need to be entirely different projects and an entirely different sets of outcomes and interviews.
Correct.
Is that helpful, Kathy, at all?
That helps a lot. Thank you. You guys,
Right.
good machetes. Thank you.
There you go. Right. Yeah, very good. All right. And with that, I have to go. I'm doing an interview for like a TV show thing that I got to get ready for right at the top of the hour. So Brian Ray, thanks so much for being our guest.
My
I
pleasure.
got a lot out of it, I know. And I've talked to you before and I've seen the app, but I got a lot out of you being here. So I hope folks enjoyed Brian's comments. And thanks for jumping in on the AMA here at the end of the session. Yeah.
My pleasure. It was great to chat, and everybody feel free to follow up, and I'm always available to
Elaine,
carry on the conversation.
My partner in crime here, thanks for organizing and keeping everything going.
Yeah, I'll send a follow-up email. We'll include a PDF of the mural from today, as well as a recording and some other resources that came up during the conversation.